Hello, everybody, and welcome again to the CSTA's webinar series. The title of the webinar presentation today is Put Your Bid on the Button, a Curling Canada Events Showcase. My introduction, I'm Stephen Trainer. On behalf of the Canadian Sport Tourism Alliance, I'll be overseeing technology, taking your questions, and supporting the presenter today. Our speaker today is Danny Lamoureux, Director, Championship Services and Curling Club Development at Curling Canada, and he'll be providing a comprehensive overview of the organization's national and international events. The webinar is scheduled to last 45 minutes to an hour. Danny will make his presentation, and there will be an opportunity throughout the presentation for questions and answers. There will also be a final opportunity for questions and answers at the end of the webinar. But before he gets started and we get started, let's go through a few technology items. If you haven't done these webinars before, it's pretty easy to follow along. There's a dashboard to the top right of your screen. And for audio, we just want to make sure everyone's using the audio feature properly. So if you've dialed in on your phone, please ensure you've entered the audio PIN number. And note that all attendees are muted due to the number of people on the line and to reduce distractions for all. So if you try to speak up to get Danny's attention, no one will be able to hear you. So if you are using the microphone and speakers on your computer as your audio, and you experience any trouble with audio during the webinar, it can most likely be resolved by switching to the telephone audio option. So for those of you who are out there, please press the raise your hand button on that menu to show me that your audio is working properly. Okay, I see lots of hands going up, which is great. That is excellent. So if you have any issues, please use the question or chat function, and I will help you with any sort of audio issues in the back end to make sure that you have complete enjoyment of the webinar. So in terms of questions, please type your questions in the box near the bottom of your dashboard, and I will let the presenter know we have a question when there is an appropriate time to pause. So if you have technology-related questions or issues, please do bring these forward to me through that question or chat box so we can try to address them right away and ensure you get to fully experience the webinar. If you'll note, there's a handout also in that menu. A PDF version of the presentation has been provided to you. You feel free to download it before you leave the webinar. When I thank you guys afterwards, the next day with a copy to the video for this webinar, I'll also include the PDF version as well. But the presenter will be running through each slide during his presentation, so please follow along on your screen. Before I go and kick it off to Danny, we're going to do something right now. We've got lots of people on here. We're going to do a poll quickly. We just want to find out exactly. The first poll we're going to ask is, has your destination or organization hosted a Curling Canada event? And we have about 30 destinations here today, and I'm going to load up that poll right now. I'm going to launch it. And you guys can click yes, no, or unsure. Maybe you're brand new in your position. You don't know what the resume is for Curling Canada events. You're just really excited about potential opportunities. But you can click on yes, no, or unsure. So right now we have 91% of those in attendance have hosted a Curling Canada event. 8% have said no. It's up to 92 now for yeses. So clearly, we have a very motivated group of people, Danny, that are interested in hearing from you today, and you can feel free to take it away from there.
Terrific. Thanks very much, Stephen, and thank you everybody for putting up with the little fiasco we had on Tuesday. As getting stuck on a train for 8 hours is not a great way to spend a day, and I apologize for not being able to do this as previously scheduled, but glad that everybody could join us today. Before I start, I'd like to extend a big thank you to CSTA. One of the best things that our organization, at that time it was Canadian Curling Association, one of the best things that we ever did was become a member or partner with CSTA, and in particular attending the tourism conference each year. That has changed the way this organization does business dramatically. Just as a little bit of background, before that time in 2009, we used to sit around the office and have championship meetings and decide where we wanted to go with our events. So we would say, well, let's have the Brier in Calgary this year. So we'd phone the local curling guys up and said, "Are you interested in being a host committee?" etc. But the transition to being partners with CSTA has opened us up to many more communities that we had never been to before with a major event, and with significant success, especially the one that I like to quote most often is St. John's, Newfoundland. We hadn't been there since 1972, and we went back there in 2017 and held a world-class championship with a world-class committee and made some very good money for the local committee. And the speed dating part, which I know you all take part of, I'm looking at my speed dating banner from this particular year in Halifax, and we were number 24. The very first city that came up to the table that morning said, "We want to host the Canadian Mixed," which is our smallest event, and it just makes me smile, the fact that the great connections and the great networking that happens at that conference. So we owe a big debt of gratitude for CSTA for managing all that for us and making us better businesses because of it. Anyhow, so we'll start the presentation on our Curling Canada Championships, and the two names you see listed here are mine and Gord McNabb. Gord and I share championship duties for Curling Canada. I look after, for our 5 major television properties, I look after the field of play and the athletes that are going to be performing in that arena, and Gord manages the operations on the ground at those 5 events with his stable of 4 event managers and other operations people that he has under him to stage the events. All other Curling Canada events that aren't on TSN, aren't part of what we call the Season of Champions, are managed by me with a staff of 3 people who look after staging those events on behalf of Curling Canada. There's 2 names that aren't on that list that are important for people who are, for cities and towns that are bidding for our business, and that our bidding committee is made up of 4 people. It's Gord and I, Catherine Henderson, who's our Chief Executive Officer, and Nolan Thiessen, who up until May 1st was just a contractor with Curling Canada, responsible for specific projects, but we've hired Nolan full-time as an employee as of this past May 1st, and his title is Manager of Championship Services, so he's at this point assisting both Gord and I on operations on the ground, but he is part of the 4-person committee that reviews all the bids that we receive for our events. So a little bit about us. We're obviously the NSO for the Olympic sport of curling. We are the largest governing body that's a member of the World Curling Federation. The good news, and people say, well, that's not really good news, what I'm going to tell you, but I think it is. The good news is we're getting smaller and smaller every year as the sport of curling grows throughout the world, and especially in the United States, where the recent Olympic win has fired up that country, a passion for the sport of curling, and their numbers are growing dramatically, and as well as their sponsorship and their cities willing to host events, etc. So while we're still the largest, the percentage of our members compared worldwide is dropping every year, which we think is a really good thing for the sport overall. One of the unique things that about our sport is that we have 14 members, which is every province, every territory in Northern Ontario. And I think we're the only sport in Canada that has equal representation from every jurisdiction in the country. And the reason for Northern Ontario, some people ask this question, and it's worth explaining. Northern Ontario was one of the very first organized curling associations in North America back in the late 1800s, and they were a charter member of the original Dominion Curling Association. So they've been part of our organization right from the very beginning, and an important part of Curling Canada today. And the reason why we toot our horn a little bit about this is because what drives attendance and what drives TV interest and what drives people to get off their couches and come out to event is that provincial territorial rivalry. So every year we have Manitoba playing Nova Scotia and Nunavut playing PEI, etc. So there's that sense of, this is my province, I'm going to cheer for them regardless who they are. which drives our business, and it's a very important part of our business that we have those traditional rivalries that people want to see when we stage events in their communities. We have over 900 affiliated curling clubs in Canada. I think the number right now is 934. There's probably another 100 to 125 curling operations that operate in our country either as curling clubs, as municipal clubs, or as strictly arena curling, where curlers take over the arena for 1 or 2 days a week, that aren't affiliated. They operate outside of our organization, but they operate curling nevertheless. Our numbers show that we have just 400,000 people who play more than once a week, which we call our traditional curling member. And our numbers of people who play at least 1 to 2 times a year is 1.9 million. And that number has grown in the last 4 years from 1.4 to 1.9 million, which is a really positive sign for us that the interest in the sport of curling is increasing across our country and across the world, as I mentioned before. And it's important that we've, for those of you who have been around the curling business or know the curling business from way back, we've worked hard at shedding our image of the 1970s and 80s when we were considered smoky bars and places where mom and dad disappeared to every weekend. And we've gravitated towards a family-based business, and we've gravitated towards athletes who are in excellent shape and really representative of top elite athletes in the world, as you all see watching the Olympics or the Brier or the World Championships, etc. And we have 25 full-time operational staff as part of Curling Canada, do everything from high performance to championships to club development to finance, etc. So annually we conduct 17 national championships. They're not 17 individual events. There's a lot of events that are doubled up, and you'll see that on the next slide. And we also operate a couple of specialty events, the Continental Cup, the Canada Cup, and a World Championship every year. So in that World Championship information is interesting. So we have a contract with the World Curling Federation that positions the men's or women's World Championship in Canada every other year. That contract is through till 2020, but the expectation from the WCF is that they will continue that relationship with us over the next quadrennial. So every year we host one of those World Championships on behalf of the World Curling Federation here in Canada, and it's part of our Season of Champions events. In the little star there, it says in Olympic years. We also stage 3 Olympic trial events, which I'll discuss a little later. And the one thing that I don't mention in this presentation anywhere is that there are other World Championships that the World Curling Federation operate. For example, the World Mixed Doubles and World Seniors, which is a combined event, was last held in Canada a couple of years ago in Lethbridge, and previous to that in Fredericton. And those have huge economic impact. There's close to 50 senior age curling teams from all over the world that attend, and there's close to 45, 46 mixed doubles teams from all over the world that attend as well. So from a pure hotel room, food and beverage play, it's a serious impact. And you can speak to both of those cities, Lethbridge and Fredericton, and ask them about how well they did financially because of hosting that, and they will give you a very positive response. The only process about this is that any city wanting to bid for a secondary World Curling Federation event, like the World Juniors in Liverpool, Nova Scotia, this coming March, it has to be approved by Curling Canada, and that's the WCF's process. The national body must approve any bid from within its borders for approval, ultimately by the WCF. And just another quick stat here: 12,000 competitive curlers or elite athletes from all provinces and territories start play at some point in the season, trying to become a national champion. And it's interesting that a couple of our smaller events, the mixed and the seniors, have the highest activity at the regional level in provinces and territories, where there's lots and lots of mixed teams, mixed 4-person mixed teams, and senior men and senior women's teams that play down to go to national championships. and ultimately those Canadian champions in those two events will represent Canada at the WCF event each year. Again, a little bit more background, and just to explain the makeup of these events. So the mixed is teams of 4, but 2 men and 2 women. The club championships event is for club curlers. It has a set of eligibility guidelines that restrict those players from playing in competitions and playing in cash events. They must be true club curlers. And that event is staged simultaneously, and there's a men's section and a women's section. Same with the juniors. There's simultaneous men's and women's in the one location. Tournament of Hearts, obviously women, Briar men. College, it's men and women. University, it's men and women. Mixed doubles, I say both genders. Mixed doubles is a 2-person team, 1 male, 1 female. Seniors, it's men and women in the same location. Wheelchair, the eligibility rules are that anytime on the ice, there must be at least 1 person of either gender playing. So it could be 2 and 2, 1 and 3, but it can't be 4 of one gender. And under 18, the same. It's boys and girls simultaneous in the same location. Just some background on the other events that we do. The Canada Cup is a strictly high performance event. It's a cash tournament with $140,000 in prize money to the 14 teams that play, and that's 7 men's and 7 women. The top 7 men and top 7 women in Canada that are invited to participate in that. But it's not just the cash. There are other things that the winning teams get that are very important to our elite curlers, and I'll go through that when we get to the Canada Cup page. The Continental Cup was designed back in 2003 to be something similar to the Ryder Cup of golf, where it's had various 2 different forms. It was Canada against the world for a while, and recently we've created as North America, so that would be Canada, USA, and Mexico, who's a member of now a member of the World Curling Federation. So it's players made up of from those 3 countries against the rest of the world, and it's a Ryder Cup format. So we play doubles, we play skins games, which is points per end rather than the regular scoring game. And it's a fun event with some significant cash money to the players, but it's more an event about pride and fun. And the players are very accessible at this event because there's no championship, no Olympics, no world event on the line for participating in this. It's all about really good television and fun television for our audience. The World Championship I explained, and then the trials, the 3 trials we talked about every 4th year. The pre-trials is an event that declares X number of teams to participate in the trials, which determines our 2 Olympic teams that will represent us in 2022 in China. And the mixed doubles trials is the same thing. We ran our very first one this past January in Portage la Prairie. I noted it here just for your information. It is not available in 2022. The arrangement we made with Portage and Canad Inns, our sponsor and our broadcast partner for this event, CBC, is that would be held in Portage in January of 2022. Okay, the bidding process has been a work in progress for us for the last 4 years. And just a quick background to that, when we started taking formal bids, we were getting bid documents that were hundreds and hundreds of pages thick, extolling all the virtues of the community and the background and the tourism stuff. And it just became very difficult for us to compare one bid to another because there was so much information for us to try and get through to make a really good decision on who should host our major events or even our smaller events. So we went to more of a much more simpler process, and what we hope is fully transparent to everybody. Whereas we have an application form that asks a whole bunch of questions, and we now then in our scoring system, we now are able to compare each event equally without having to wade through a whole bunch of extra stuff that people might pile on, because the last thing that we wanted to do, and the bullet that says no site visits, is we wanted to avoid the quote unquote whining and dining. We wanted to avoid people having extra dollars to really enhance their bid just to make it look fancy but not actually contribute to the event. We wanted to avoid all those distractions, and we didn't want host cities to be spending piles of money to try and secure our bid. Rather, work through this process. And it's getting treated fairly. We keep updating things based on comments that we get from bidding cities that things need to be adjusted a little bit, and we take those into consideration and work through them. So there's no site visits. We will only do a site visit if we have a couple of cities that are really close in the scoring and we need to go on the ground to take a closer look. And if we decide to do that, that's at no cost to any of the bidding cities. That's a Curling Canada cost. The last three bullets are important. We get asked this question all the time. Do you have a east-west central rotation? Will you put an event in the same area back-to-back years? Yeah, the answer is no to the rotation, and yes, we will go back-to-back in the same areas if it makes financial sense when we're able to. Sorry?
Hi there. We're still hearing you now.
You're not hearing me?
I am hearing you. Please keep going.
Sorry.
Yep.
So there is no regional bias. We don't have any rotation process in place. We used to try and take 2 years west, 1 year in the east, etc. We don't do that anymore. The bidding system and the scoring system are what drives our decision making, and the television and streaming. So we're at the point now, starting this year, where every event that we do, whether it's the mixed or a world championship, will either be televised or streamed at no cost to any bidding city. Those are all Curling Canada expenses that we incur to make sure we produce solid, really good television and really good streaming. So we'll start off with our events, and we'll just go through them. Actually, I go through them in chronological order as how they appear on our calendar. So the first one is the Canadian Mixed. It's a four-person team, 2 men and 2 women. It's November time frame. Early to mid-November is fine. We're flexible on playing dates with that one. We could be late October to middle November, anywhere in that time frame. And actually, one of the things that we did last year, and we're doing a little bit more this year, is that there's no obligation to conclude any of our smaller events on a traditional Sunday. We finished the seniors last year in Stratford on a Thursday. We finished university and college in Leduc on a Wednesday. We're quite open to be flexible on deciding what dates work best for the venue and the city and the bidding group. So we need a minimum of 4 sheets of ice, club or small arena. So this event is interesting. It's not a huge food and beverage play. It's not a huge hotel play, but it works extremely well in small town Canada. Our last 2 were in Swan River, Manitoba, and Yarmouth, Nova Scotia. Both terrific events. World-class input from the players. They just love the entire experience. But it also can work in a major city, but not as a major food and beverage hotel play, not necessarily a major media play, because it would get lost in the city of Toronto. But it works well when a big club like the Weston Golf and Country Club that held it a few years back, as a way to celebrate an anniversary. In this case, they were celebrating 100 years of curling, and they used the Canadian Mixed as the pinnacle of their celebration that year, and it did very well for the club. So those options are there. There's 42 hours of streaming. Again, our cost. The host committees retain all the revenue for this event, and obviously all the fulfillment. there's 56 athletes and 7 to 10 officials. A few of our events, Yarmouth in particular, I think did a formal STEAM economic impact study, and they look at $400,000. So that may not be a lot for the city of Toronto, but for the town of Yarmouth, that's a huge impact for them. Hotel rooms are roughly 280, and all the hotel room numbers that I'll show you through the slides do not include fans, family, supporters, etc. They're strictly athletes and staff, and in some cases, broadcast people. And for most of, if not all of our events, either the athlete or Curling Canada is responsible for transportation, hotels, and per diems. None of those costs are downloaded to any host committee except for the Brier and Tournament of Hearts. Everything else is borne by Curling Canada or the athletes. And our bid fee is $5,000. Club championship, and this was the one we explained, was the one where you have to be a regular club curler to be able to participate in this event, and there's other eligibility requirements that if you go to a Canadians one year, you cannot participate the following year, just to give more people a chance. This is a really fun event. It's not about world-class curling. The curling is very good, but of course it's not anywhere as good as the Canada Cup or Brier Tournament of Hearts. But it's a very good competition played by down-to-earth club people who have a really good time while they're in your city, and they bring a lot of fans and friends with them, because for most of them it's the first ever national championship, and they would never be able to get to a bigger national championship because of skill level, time, commitment, etc. Again, the smaller events, all revenue derived from the event belong to the host committee. There's 112 athletes. In some cases, there's some coaches who attend. There's 15 to 20 officials. Economic impact is around $750,000, and one of the big impacts is food and beverage at the particular curling club where we hold the event. This past year was at Cataraqui Golf and Country in Kingston, and the year before was Ottawa Hunt Club Ottawa Hunt and Golf Club in Ottawa. Both did major sales for the week, more than they would with a significant golf tournament in the summertime, which is good for us. It shows that curling can deliver bottom line to everybody. Bid fee there is $7,500. So the Canada Cup, as I explained, it's a cash event. The top 7 teams, men's teams, and the top 7 women's teams in Canada are invited to participate in a round robin. It's in some years it qualifies teams right to the curling trials or the Olympic trials. I'm actually not allowed to use the word Olympic according to COC rules, but we'll use it for this seminar. And it determines the teams who participate in the Continental Cup. So there's some really nice prizes at the end of this for the winning team. So it's a very high level, top level performance, curling performance by our teams. It spans 5 days. It attracts decent crowds, and it's certainly a large TV audience. It's played in late November, early December. I just threw some TV numbers in there. This is from 2016. The average minute audience was 192,000. Total reach for the entire broadcast was 4.5 million. TSN broadcasts every single minute of this event from start to finish, including any tiebreaker games, if there are any, which is very valuable to the people who get to put their logos in the ice. So there's a significant exposure there for tourism, the city, the province, etc. Economic impact varies based on location, 2 to 4 million. Most of the audience that attend this thing come within 100 miles of the venue. So, for example, this year we're in Estevan, so we'll be selling. The ticket buyers will come from Regina, 100 miles north, and 100 miles into Manitoba, and to some extent in the U.S., because the northern U.S. states have very strong curling markets. So we would have a decent audience coming there. So there's not a lot of traveling back and forth, but these people do stay overnight in hotels. The bid fee is $100,000, and that includes 2 in-ice logos, one at each end on all sheets, so that whatever the bidding is, if it's a tourism board or the provincial territorial government sponsoring, that logo is in the ice for every single minute of the 42 hours of live television. Continental Cup, it says currently unavailable, and the reason for that is we are back in the United States this year in Las Vegas. We've had really good success with this event 3 times now in Vegas. So we've developed a relationship with the United States Curling Association, because obviously we need their permission to operate on the ground on U.S. soil. So we've entered into a relationship with them on a 1-year trial, and if the trial works out, we foresee leaving the Continental Cup in Las Vegas for up to the next 4 years, assuming that it still does well financially, ticket-wise. And there's no reason to think it won't. Ticket sales already for January 2019 or beyond our expectations. So for the horizon, it's just for you to know that it's on the horizon, that event exists, and ultimately it will become available again in Canada as a property to bid on, but at this point it's probably not going to be available till 2022. Canadian Juniors, it's my favorite event to run. We have 28 teams, all 14 member associations, men and women, boys and girls attend. It's a full 9 days. We require 8 sheets of ice, and one of the prerequisites that we look for in this bid is that we likely, unless it's the only city bidding, we likely wouldn't accept a bid that's strictly based in a curling club. We need a small hockey arena up, from 500 seats to 2,500 seats, simply because this event is a key part of our long-term athlete development model, and we need these young athletes to experience what we call stadium ice, with the cameras and the lights and the carpet and the competition stones and the electronic handles, so that when they get to a Brier or a Tournament of Hearts, they're not in awe of the environment when they walk into the arena the first time. So an arena, at least one arena is critical for this bid. It comes with 14 hours of live television, closing weekend, semifinals for both men and women, and finals for both. And I have TSN and RDS here. I apologize for not having that on the other slide. So anywhere TSN broadcast, RDS broadcast as well. So we do have the events are exposed in Quebec on that French network. Plus, this year for the first time, we will be streaming all round robin games right up to the point that TSN arrives on site in Prince Albert is our 2019 site, right up until they arrive, and then we switch over to the live broadcast. Same with our other events. It's fully operated by a committee with supervision from Curling Canada, and 100% of all revenue belongs to them. There's 140 coaches and athletes, plus officials, sponsors, and in the last 4 to 5 days, another 35 to 40 hotel rooms booked by the TSN when their crew come in to broadcast. There's really good participation for this event from family and friends and supporters. It varies depending on how the field shapes up in terms of who's playing. If we get a lot of teams that repeat, have been there second, third, and fourth time, we get less parents that show up. If we have an event where most of the teams are there for the first time, we get a really good response from moms and dads and brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles, etc., which drives up obviously the economic impact. There's significant hotel room implications, again, just for players, Curling Canada and TSN, 1,250 room nights, and the bid fee is $30,000.
Danny, just a quick question about the juniors there. We've got a lot of questions. We're going to save them sort of after we go through the summary, but this one specifically for the juniors. What time of the year is that juniors event?
Right now, the juniors is scheduled for mid to late January. In the Olympic years, it gets kind of crazy because we lose the whole month of February. But normally this year it's like January 17 to 29. And the reason it's at that time of the year is the World Championship starts in late February. So, and generally the World Junior Championship is in some remote place of the world, and we need to get our teams prepared to go and win medals. So that's the reason why it's in January. But I will tell you that there's internal discussion, and it's not super confidential, but there's internal discussion about moving that event into April and sending our winning teams the following year to give them more preparation to win the World Juniors. So we would flip U18 and U21, but at least up until 2020, it will be that January 17 to 2028 range.
Thank you.
Next is Tournament of Hearts, and one of the events that we're really proud of. Kruger has been our sponsor for over 30 years, the longest sponsorship of women's sports in Canada, and they're quite pleased with their product. It's the only really promotion that company does to promote their products. Its format has changed from previous years. Last year we started the first 16 team format with a wild card game on the Friday night. Arena size is anywhere from 3,500 to 5,000, which seems to be the sweet spot for this event in terms of visually looking really nice on television. That's what the next bullet says. You know, we may get somebody that says we want to have the Tournament of Hearts and we'll give you, $1 billion to host it. But if there's nobody, well, maybe we take the $1 billion. But if there's nobody in the stands, it just looks awful on television and sends the wrong message and a wrong perception about our brand and our sport to the television audience. So we think that 3,500 to 5,000 seat arena does really well for us. We can generally put 3,000 to 4,000 in for weekly games at night in the opening weekend, and then generally get it close to full for the closing weekend. Again, it's a really neat visual for us on television. So the bids for these two cornerstone events for Curling Canada, which is Tournament of Hearts and Brier, we as an organization need to be convinced that it will be financially successful and it will look good on television. So television is a big number here. 75 hours of live TV, TSN, and RDS. Average minute audience is good. 373,000 on average. 610,000 for the final, and 610,000 for the final. We were dead against the Super Bowl last year. Same time, same day. So for us to pull in 600,000 people watching it was really good. I mean, it's down obviously from our 800,000 to 900,000 we would normally get, but we had no choice but to go up against the Super Bowl because the Olympics really changes our schedule dramatically in Olympic years. Total reach was huge. It's 10 days of competition. The host committee legacy is 10% of ticket sales and 100% of 50-50 revenue. So the host committees for these two events, the Canada Cup and the World Championship, don't have any risk in terms of the budget of the event. So if the event loses money because of whatever reason, the host committee still gets their 10% of ticket sales and 100% of 50-50 money. And that could be pretty significant. I mean, the Brier the Brier and St. John's was a great example, but their 50-50 total revenue, 50-50 in 2017 was $506,000 in 50-50. And I think the Curling Association that was the recipient of the net profit ended up with something like $226,000 free and clear after all said and done. The people were paid out and the licensing fees were done. So there's significant money there. And again, it's 100% to the local committee. The 10% of ticket sales for a Tournament of Hearts would be anywhere from $90,000 to $120,000 clear. So the economic impact, and these are studies done by CSTA on our behalf using Steam Pro. They vary from, again, based on location, from as low as $6 million to as high as $12 million. Hotel rooms booked. Again, this is just players, broadcasters, sponsors, Curling Canada, and anybody else affiliated with us is over 2,000 room nights for the event. The bid fee is $300,000. So obviously, I get this question. Well, if I'm only going to make $100,000 on ticket sales and $100,000 on 50-50, why would we give you 300? Well, we're not expecting the 300 to come from the host committee. The 300 should be coming from the province or municipality or other funding partners in return for the economic impact and the nice logos that get huge television coverage for a week in February. Again, the Briar is our pinnacle event. It's been happening since 1927. It's one of the greatest curling events in the world, and will continue to be for a long time. It can be. At one time, we in our glory days, what we call the late 90s, from about 1995 to about 2003, we were doing very well in NHL size buildings. We were putting 12 to 15,000 people in the Saddle Dome, in Northlands Coliseum, etc. But that wave diminished a little bit after that, and then the price of NHL arenas went skyrocketing way beyond our capabilities to pay and hopefully make a profit at the end. So we've experimented with moving to smaller venues where we take complete ownership of the city, aka St. John's, aka even Ottawa. Briar 2 years ago was very, very successful, was the talk of the town for the entire week, and we fill the building. We're financially successful. The host committee is successful. It's a great TV product, and everybody's happy at the end of the day. So at one time, people would not bid for events because they thought we lived in NHL buildings for the Briar. That's no longer the case. The 4,000 square feet of associated space or ancillary space is for the legendary Briar Patch, and the information on the other slides was for the Heartstop Lounge and the Patch and our other big events. And it's just a big bar that's part of our ticket package, which includes not only the ability you get to come and watch curling, but you can go watch live music and entertainment and other activities in our big food and beverage lounge that we set up at our expense. And just as an example, which is a really funny story, last year in Regina, the building I think was ready for about 6,000 people in terms of actual tickets that we could sell to watch curling, but the Briar Patch would hold 7,500 people. It was the size of 2 football fields. It was a spectacular thing to see. But that's Regina. That's not what we need. We need a place for the Briar for roughly 2,500, 2,000 to 3,000 people, roughly 40 to 50,000 square feet. And again, our operations team, we have entertainment director, we have a food and beverage guy that will manage the complete setup of that patch on behalf of the committee. Most of that stuff is the same as the Tournament of Hearts. The economic impact is much higher. The last steam we did was Newfoundland in 2017. The economic impact was $10.1 million. Oops. And the bid fee is $500,000 again, which includes the nice logo and a whole bunch of other fulfillment things that we can offer as part of the package. So the World Championships, again, it varies from year to year. It flips from year to year. So this past year in 2018 was in North Bay, Ontario. In 2019, it's in Lethbridge, Alberta. North Bay was women, Lethbridge will be men. And in 2020, it will be back to women being hosted in Canada. So there's two different sizes of arenas, even though the events are operated by Curling Canada, managed field of play by the World Curling Federation. They're both managed equally the same. They just don't garner the same attention. So the men is a 5,000 seat arena, similar to a Briar. The square footage of the patch can be a little bit smaller because we don't have the traditional provincial territorial rivalry going to a Briar to cheer on their teams. We do get, a significant number of out-of-country fans and supporters that come and watch their countries play at this World Championship, but nowhere near the level of, not nowhere near, but not near the level of the Brier. Same amount of television, 75 hours. The TV numbers are really good. The World Women's this past year in North Bay was, we hit a huge home run. I don't mind saying this publicly because I've said it before. After we selected North Bay as our site, we did a site visit with television and the World Curling Federation and other people, and the first thing one of them said, "Who the heck picked this site?" And I go, "Oh, we better do really well." Well, we hit a huge home run. It was one of the best World Women's Championships ever run in any country since the early 1980s when it started. We haven't seen the economic impact yet from North Bay, but once we get that number, we'll certainly issue a news release to let people know what it was. So the bid fee ranges: World Women $250, World Men's $400. Again, different impact between the two. World Men's is higher, obviously, than World Women's. College and universities. So this is interesting. We tried something new last year, and I'm not sure if I think Leduc's on the phone. We tried something new this year where we combined 4 events under one roof, and that's the first time that we've done more than 2 events in one location in our history. And we did it because Leduc had really exceptional facilities. They had 2 small arenas and 8 sheets of curling ice. So with that amount of footprint for us to operate, we were able to put 32 college and university teams in for the first 5 days, and then 32 mixed doubles teams in for the last 5 days. And in the curling club, we ran a wheelchair championship at the same time. So the building was blocked for the entire time. There were a lot of things that we learned from that event on how to improve it for coming years, but now we know that we can do something like this successfully, and the economic impact, again, the food and beverage play is huge, because we're quadrupling the number of people that are in the community for events by running these combined events. So it requires a minimum of 8 sheets of ice. Leduc, we had 2 hockey rinks, which was ideal because we have similar playing conditions, and again, the LTAD support that we need to improve skill level of these athletes. We want to give them that stadium experience right from the get-go, and not have them go back and forth between an arena and a curling club, but certainly one curling club and one arena is satisfactory for bidding. A terrific number of people, like 192 coaches and athletes, and a lot of family and friends attend. Again, for many of these university college athletes, this is the first time they've been on a national stage in a stadium condition. So it's a really cool experience for them. And college is the first time college joined Curling Canada's organization last year for the first time, which is really important, again, to us and also to them. So they really ramped up the playing experience for their athletes. So just the room nights for those 32 teams is like in the $750 range. So at the same time, we held mixed doubles, and mixed doubles is, for those of you who watched it at the Olympics with John Morris and Caitlin Laws, it was an incredible success with the Olympics, and the IOC was over the top with the WCF about that experience, and it's driven awareness everywhere in the world about the sport, and it's become very popular at the event in Canada. And again, we ramped it up from a curling club-based event for the first 5 years to now we tag it along with university and college on stadium ice for that terrific experience for our athletes. The streaming here is same with university and college. We stream it from top to bottom. We stream mixed doubles, but this is one of those deals that we have a streaming deal with CBC for these non-season champions events, and CBC has indicated that they will do live television for mixed doubles. They did 2 shows from Leduc last year live on the CBC main network. They're talking about doing 3 broadcasts from Fredericton, which is massive for for any host committee to have that logo in on the CBC network, because you don't have to worry about cord cutters. CBC is free. It's available on every platform. Everybody in Canada can watch it without any convenience. So having that as a television property is valuable to not only us but to potential bidders. So the wheelchair one, we added it into Leduc because the facility was fully accessible. The whole situation was just perfect to have that event there. It's not an easy event to operate because we are, as a host committee, because we are operating with up to 60 wheelchair athletes. So which is not easy. You need full accessibility to the arena, full accessibility to all facilities that you have. The hotels need to be fairly accessible. We don't need fully accessible rooms for 60 people. That just doesn't exist. But we need a hotel room with at least four fully accessible four fully accessible rooms that we can operate as a community shower, etc. For those people in power chairs, etc. They have a place now that they can go and use those facilities. But it is a really good event in terms of your ability to get grants at the local level. So a couple of our clubs in the past that have bid for this event have also applied for accessibility grants, saying to the government, listen, we're getting the opportunity to host this event. We need to get an elevator. We need to get, wider doors, improved bathrooms, whatever. So they were able to get infrastructure grants to help those operations based on the fact that they were having Canadian wheelchair growing championships. It's a little less stressful on the committee and than other events because we only play 2 games a day, usually afternoon and evening. So it's a lot simpler on the volunteers. Economic impacts and progress. It's probably the same, roughly as the mix, probably in the $350,000 to $450,000 range, as there are a fair number of family and friends who come, if anything, to support, but others because they're physical support for their spouses who are in the chairs. And there's no bid fee for the wheelchair, and we actually do support the event with a hosting grant of $5,000 to help them offset any additional cost to the fact that they're operating a wheelchair event on our behalf. Under 18, I think this is the last one. This is a brand new event for us. Again, we're very committed to filling the gaps in our LTAD. This was one of the gaps that we had. We started this competition 2 years ago in Moncton. Hugely successful, and again this past year in St. Andrews. It's the same numbers as the Canadian Juniors, but it's a shorter competition. Instead of the 9 days, it's only 6 days, and we play in pools with crossover games, etc. But again, like the Juniors, we need at least one small arena where we will go in and build stadium conditions for these young kids, these young athletes to have that experience. So when they get to the Juniors, it's not something new. And when we get to the Briar Tournament Arts, it's not something new again. So some final comments. Bid process. All bids received are treated with full confidentiality from our standpoint. It's a closed process, meaning we do not share any of the bids that come through our office with our Curling Canada Board of Governors or any other staff in our organization. It's kept within those 4 people, unless of course people publicly have bid processes out there where they're pre-selling tickets, etc., which we've seen some in the media already. I mean, those, if people ask us about other cities and those are public, we refer them to Google and go find out about what they're doing in Lethbridge to get the World Men's. We reserve the right, obviously, not to accept any bid, and we're not obligated to accept the highest bid. Again, that's basically because internally, the visual that we see on television is important to us. So, big money and no fans is not a good recipe. reasonable money and in a nice 3/4 full to full stadium is very important to us as an organization. So the bids must, and the bid next point, the bids must be in that document that we supply. We won't accept anything else. If I mean, no disrespect to anybody with your tourism brochures and stuff, and you can include those, but they won't be referenced when we sit down to do our couple of days of scoring and wading through all of the bids that we receive. As I said already, any site visit that we need to do at any time prior to the bid, during the bid process, or even after the bid's awarded, is all a Curling Canada expense. We do not push any of those costs onto any bidding committee or any host committee. And the last bullet is this came about in the last couple of years. Once we have a scoring a system where we have a bunch of cities or a couple of cities that are reasonably close, we may ask for more information, or we may ask to come and visit so we can get if we haven't seen the building before, so we can get a look at what we're talking about to be able to adjust our scoring and ultimately decide on who's going to get the bid. We haven't had to do that yet, but that's part of our process. Bidding tips for those who are putting packages together. It's critical that the local curling community is engaged, and whether that's an association. So if you're in the Ottawa area, for example, there's an association called the Ottawa Valley Curling Association. They need to be actively involved, because at the end of the day, they were going to be responsible for recruiting that army of volunteers that's required to stage a big event. And they're going to be required to be the face of the Fan Fest and ticket promotions in the community, which ultimately is where they're going to make their legacy. And it's critical, and it's actually one of our bylaws, that our member curling associations need to be involved. And it's not a huge involvement. They just need to know that you're preparing a bid for a particular event to Curling Canada, just so it's on their radar, so that they know when they're planning their calendar that they might have to stay clear of that particular date, or they may have had that particular city in mind for something that they wanted to do. So they will keep everything in very close confidence as well, but you need to get a letter of support from the member association. Additionally, the committee leaders are critical. So in our Season of Champions events, the 5 big ones, there are 3 vice chairs, one in charge of facilities, one in charge of hosting, one in charge of volunteers. Those 3 people are critical to the operation of the event. They need to be well chosen, and so that, because they're going to be running this army of volunteers under the supervision of Gord McNabb, and they need to be really good at what they do. Pre-selling of tickets, and I'm sure you've seen this already in the media. Some cities doing this for particular events, from the World Women's, the Tournament of Hearts and Briar. This just gives us a really good indication that we are going to be able to fill the building reasonably well with faces that are going to be seen on TV. In some cases, we get bidding cities that don't do this, but they're generally traditional hotbeds of curling. For example, Regina, last year's Briar, didn't pre-sell any tickets, but we know from 80 years of history that Regina people will show up to watch curling. So this is more for new cities to Curling Canada big events, just to show that there is going to be support when a ticket campaign gets launched. People, and you get the bid and ticket campaigns launched, people are going to buy tickets. Municipal and provincial territorial support, critical. We talked about that. Value in kind is an interesting one. We only consider in your bid document, we only consider any value in kind proposals that have direct impact on our event budget. So it could be, for example, if I walked off the street and I wanted to rent your building, your arena for 10 days, it was going to be $200,000. But you tell me we can have the building for $100,000, and a part of our bid is $100,000 in kind towards the building cost. That's budget relief for us. But for example, if you said we will offer you free transportation for your supporters to get from the hotel to arena, that's really not any budget relief to us. So that won't get considered as well as something that gives us direct budget relief. And again, venue costs. Sorry, the last one is venue costs should be all in. We've been burned a little bit by this in the past, where we've been told arena costs are this. We've awarded the bid. We've signed all the contracts, and then we find out you got to add for this, you got to add for Wi-Fi, you got to add for deliveries, you got to add. So we don't want to have to get surprised like that in the future when you're in your venue contracts. So as best as possible, include all the venue costs that we will experience from our end in your bid package. And the final slide, timelines, pretty simple. So by this January, and actually we're pretty close to releasing this information now to our member association, all of our confirmed dates for 2020-21. We do have bylaw latitude with our voting members to move events 7 days either way without having to go to an official vote at an AGM or a special AGM. So those dates will go out probably this September. They're pretty much ready to go now. So how our system works is by April 30th, all we require is a simple one-sentence email saying, yes, we have interest in bidding for the Brier in 2021. That's all we're looking for at this point. May 15th from May 15th onwards, questions can be asked of Curling Canada. If the questions asked are specific to the city that's asking the questions and aren't relevant to any other bidding city, we'll reply strictly to that city. But if the answer has relevance to all the bidders, we will reply to all bidding cities that have submitted letters of interest. All applications are due June 30th. From July to August, we do our scoring and site visits scheduled if necessary. Again, we haven't had to do one yet, but that's an option. And final decisions, notifications by September 30th. And then we would work with once the bids are announced, we would work with the local committees, the local municipality, the bidding system, the tourism departments, economic development, whoever it was, to stage a formal press release announcing the successful bid. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right, Danny, that was amazing. And I can tell how interested people are because I think we have a record number of questions. And before people jump off the line, I'd like to have a chance to ask you those questions, Danny, if you're okay with that.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the first question is sort of a generic question. So we see in your timeline there about the April 30th deadline. What happens to a municipality if they are very, very interested or keen on sending in a letter of intent but aren't able to actually hit that deadline for legitimate reasons? Say there's a change in management or some sort of act of, I don't know, there's flooding or whatever the reason may be. Is there any flexibility to those deadlines, or do you have to stick to it in order to keep it fair for everyone?
What's the April 30th deadline or the June 30th?
The letter of intent deadline.
Well, at this point, there's no flexibility because it's published and that's the deadlines. But it's an interesting question that I will make reference to, and we'll discuss it this summer with our bidding committee. And maybe we do put maybe April 30 to May 1st. The letters have to be, etc. But I think we need to stick to the June 30th deadline to properly make our decisions and make those press releases early in the fall so we can launch our ticket campaigns in December of that year, because the Christmas period is extremely lucrative for us to sell tickets, and that's how we backed up to that date.
Cool. Okay, so we have a question about scoring system. So can you share information on the scoring system per event, unless it is the same for all? So is it the scoring system for all events, or is it different?
It's the same for all events.
Okay. And how is it broken down? Can you speak in like general terms on that?
You know what? I never anticipated that question. So if if I can do it once I get off the air and send you an email, and you can send it to everybody, or you can wait while I look it up.
No, I think that's great. We can follow up with that as part of the follow up. Time of
I
year.
wasn't expecting.
Sorry, time of year for the Juniors Pro event.
Yeah, I think I answered that one. It's like it's late January, but there is potential for a shift. A sizable shift in how we manage our youth operations starting in 2021. But that won't be decided until this September. So at this point, it's late January.
And what about the college and university event? What's the timing for that one?
That one's in March. We can't go any later than that because of exams. We don't have any issues with March break. These are athletes in training, so they're okay with missing their March break to go to a national curling championship. But it needs to be no earlier than March 1st and no later than like March 27th, somewhere in that range.
I've got a really. Sorry, go ahead.
Because of exams.
Yeah. I've got a really interesting question here. Someone that's thinking down ahead. Can the associated facility for the beer gardens be a temporary outside structure? I'm assuming with heat.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And the final one that we've got to ask you here is, can you give an example of a challenge of hosting a championship that a city can help to solve or make easier? Besides grants, how can a city support an event?
Well, they could certainly. There's a couple of ways. They could certainly be active with our fan fests and our ticket marketing, and help us push tickets in the community, not just to individuals who want to go and watch curling because they're fans of curling, or people who may have put deposits on pre-sales, but selling to corporations, like convincing, a reasonably sized corporation in town to buy 10 tickets to hand out to their staff. We as our marketing team coming in, we won't have that networking ability because we won't know who those people are. So the community, the economic development guys, they know that business in their city. They would know who we could go talk to sell tickets, both corporately and to the public. One of the other ways is obviously transportation is a big issue in terms of our bigger events, where the hotel is, where the arena is, and where the bar area is. And what we've found in the last 3 to 4 years is events where we've had to position the bar, where we had to provide transportation to get from the arena to the bar. They don't do as well as being within walking distance. So if you can somehow figure out a way, and I just heard that one about an outdoor facility outside the arena, that's a way to solve that issue. That's a way where people can leave their seats in the fifth end, go and have a beer and a sandwich, and come back in the seventh end without having to get on a bus and drive to another location.
Yeah. Are all competing cities followed up with on September 30th?
Yes.
Okay. Is it possible to get a sample host budget for a specific event?
Yes.
And who looks after ice making? Sorry, go ahead.
So the sample budget, tell them to email me directly, danny@curling.ca, and I'll provide you. We're talking about a major TV event now, right?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, so I'll get them a sample budget. Just tell them to send me an email.
Okay. And who looks after ice making costs and staffing?
Curling Canada, 100%.
Okay. So,
sorry, Stephen. One other thing there. Sorry. It's 100% financially, but we do require 8 to 16 volunteers per day during installation, and some volunteers during the event to help move snow, push brooms, and keep the place clean. But there's no financial commitment by anybody for ice installation.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you for answering that question, and thank you for answering all those questions. It's probably a record for quantity and quality for our webinars here. So just as a wrap up, I want to thank you all for your participation. I want to thank Danny. You're one of the best in the business. You've been with Curling Canada for a long time. You've really you and your organization have really built up an amazing set of events, sort of one of the standards for the industry. So thank you so much, Danny. For all of you that participated today, no problem. And you will be prompted to provide some feedback at the end of the webinar. So please take the time to answer the questions about the webinar, as it helps us to improve the new webinar series. Our next webinar is a best practices with Bob O'Doherty presentation. As you know, Bob has been instrumental in authoring some of our best practice templates for the CSDA. He's had a leadership role with Pan Am Games and many others. So it's a must attend for cities and sport groups that want to learn from one of the most experienced and successful sport event executives in the country. And if you have any other ideas you want to share with us, please send me an email afterwards. Thanks for attending, everybody. Thanks for Danny for leading the webinar today, and we hope everybody has a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.